Okay, so we are now in chapter 8. We've covered a lot of ground, and I think this chapter in particular is really going to help us not just keep continuing to understand the development of Western civilization, but also see how many of the modern complications that we can look at from World War One and the tensions between the West and the Islamic world that still exists, and the way that Russia is kind of always on the outs of the Western European world, and despite the fact that it has its own Christian legacy, that technically, they should be in the club instead of out of the club, so to speak. I mean, what I'm saying is that this is the beginning of things that will help us slowly start putting together not just Western civilization, but the way the Western civilization reacts and why it reacts in the way that it does with other parts of the world. Okay, so I am, as usual, going to skip over many aspects of the PowerPoints here that I'm assuming that you wrote, and I'm going to focus on certain other aspects of information. I will go into quite a bit of detail on Islam, a little bit further than what they've covered in the text itself. But as I always mention, if there's something that you want clarification on and you find of interest, or you're disappointed I didn't go over, please call me up or ask any questions, okay? All right, so we're going to be dealing with medieval empires and Borderlands, Byzantium and Islam. Okay. So as we learned in our last chapter, Byzantium is the survival of the Roman Empire. And it is going to carry on the Roman Empire's legacy, but in a way that's very different and unique compared to the way that we saw things in the West, right? And so it's also dealing with a different set of issues. So you had in the West, there was the issues of the Germanic peoples in particular that the Roman Empire had to deal with. For much of Byzantium, the real competitor is going to be Persia, okay? And so, in any case, we're going to discuss about all this in much more detail. This picture here, just to kind of briefly explain, is the Hagia Sophia, which is in Turkey now. It was a church and then a mosque henceforth, where you see Allah written here and Muhammad and parts of the Quran, but it also has icons on it. It's now more a national heritage piece that celebrates kind of the mixed legacy of that part of the world. But anyways, okay, so returning back to Byzantium. As it was mentioning in there, and I just kind of want to focus on this part instead of learning about the means in which Byzantium was able to hold on to still being integrated with the West and control the West, it ends up losing a lot of it. And so you're going to see from this point more and more of the East really being in the East and the West really being in the West in terms of the church and the legacy of Rome. The Bulgarian church gets brought up in here. And Bulgaria is definitely usually not discussed about in much details in Western media or press. And I have to say that when I took Western civilization many years ago, I'm not quite sure we ever covered Bulgaria. It is interesting now that historians over time start kind of looking at things more closely, and occasionally will emphasize certain things that have been kind of muted or downplayed in the past. I'm not quite sure. Maybe I just forgot about it back then. But it's interesting though, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as when we get into the discussion of the Vikings as well. But in any case, around the 9th century, the Bulgarians are going to convert to Christianity, and you'll see here that conversion to religion during this time, in particular by rulers, is so clearly political. It's as political as when we saw the Ptolemies creating the Serapis cult, trying to fuse Egyptian and Greek religion to make this as a kind of a Greco-Egyptian religion over the world. And so you see these leaders embracing Christianity out of practicality, or other religions. So this wasn't just a problem that the Christians had. I think it's fair to say that you're going to have leaders who do have a sincere belief in given religions, but it's so often the case that it happens out of practicalness. Pagans and polytheists that were all over the world were just never able to unify. I mean, you see the way the Germanic tribes were. You look at many of the things here in this chapter of the various aspects of the Slavs and other groups of people don't have anything to unify them. And Christianity as a religion is just so important for that. And later Islam is going to be having the same kind of effect. Now, the other aspect about the Bulgars that I want to mention is that they were able to get a relatively independent church, although as officially still under control of Constantinople and Byzantium. And it also was able to use Slavic liturgy rather than Latin or Greek. And this legacy that was produced was able to, and this legacy, this is going to be more appealing for these people to create a kind of Slavic identity in the future. They had an alphabet eventually that was going to be created, the Cyrillic alphabet, and so they're going to create more literacy. They're going to create a church liturgy that is going to be known as Old Church Slavonic, and it is going to be another unifying factor for this part of the world. And this liturgy is going to spread among Serbs, Romanians, and eventually Russians. Now, the book says, creating cultural ties among these widespread peoples that have survived to the present. Yes. So often when we look at the Balkans and some of the tensions within the Balkans and the Russia sides on one side over another, some things that can seem so confusing, over time, if you kind of can somehow pick up on many of the things that we've been learning in this text and reading, you'll start to see the way that this history from back then bounces into the modern times and really kind of makes sense out of things that are just seeming so chaotic. Okay. So let's see here. Actually, I want to go back. Okay, I'm just going to end. Oops, I'm going to end there. All right, I'm going to end this section on this for right now. Okay.